everybody to the Lane County Board of Commissioners meeting for September 29th, 2020. I'm just going to read a few items that we do in the morning at each meeting, and then we'll get into our agenda. So for the public that's watching this meeting, when you registered for the meeting, you were registered in our system as attendees. Your microphone and your webcam are automatically muted as attendees. However, there will be a time in the meeting where we'll open it up for public comment. And when that time comes, if you wish to speak during public comment, we'll ask you to raise your virtual hand. You should have a hand icon on your device and you'll just click it once. When your public comment begins, when our public comment begins, our meeting organizer will call the names, and when your name is called, you'll be unmuted and given 3 minutes for public comment. When your 3 minutes is up, you'll go back into muted status and you can continue to watch for as long as you'd like. We'll try to give everyone who wishes to participate a moment to give 3 minutes, but please note that in the event that there are more people wishing to speak than the time allots, I may need to limit the number of speakers, reduce the time allotted, or randomly pick folks to participate. And we haven't had to do that as of yet. We do have a few items before public comment, and we have one 3 p.m. time certain. So the first item on our agenda today is a public hearing and order and resolution 20-09-29-01 in the matter of adopting fiscal year 2020 and 2021 supplemental budget number 1, making, reducing, and transferring appropriations. And with us is Christine Moody, our budget and financial planning manager. We'll have her give a summary and then we'll go into the public hearing portion. Ms. Moody.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Buck, Commissioners. So you do have a memorandum that gives you a summary of the supplemental, but I'd like to highlight just a few things for you. This supplemental is about $26 million in size. A piece of that, a large piece of that is the PERS side account that you'll remember approving. And so that is $10 million, some of those funds moving between funds in order to make that payment to PERS, which has occurred and our side account has been started. There are also other things that the board has previously approved that are coming forward in this supplemental, including the repayment of transient room tax for the lots that were given to Homes for Good out at the Lane Event Center. There are COVID resources coming into Health and Human Services in the amount of about $9.8 million. $500,000 to the farmers market, which was part of the land agreement with the city of Eugene. And there's a $400,000 Business Oregon grant that's being added to the budget. There are also some FTE. The majority of those have also been approved in prior board orders, and the majority of those are in Health and Human Services. There are a couple others to point out. There's an FTE being added in the Sheriff's Office, a deputy being added to the Cresswell contract. There's a capital project manager being added out in Public Works, and then one FTE in Human Resources to help with the additional workload as our departments grow in size. They have additional tasks to complete. So with that, I'm open for questions or going forward with the public hearing.
Very good. Let's go forward with the public hearing first, and then we can open it up for questions and discussion by the Board of Commissioners. So this is a public hearing on a supplemental budget for the current fiscal year budget as allowed under ORS 294.471 and ORS 294.473. This public hearing is required under ORS 294.473 due to one or more funds amending expenditures by more than 10% from current budgeted amounts. Notice this hearing and summary of the changes was published as detailed in the supplemental budget order and resolution included in the agenda item. Participants may testify for or against any item contained in the supplemental budget. With that, I will open the public hearing and ask if there is anybody in our audience as attendees who wishes to speak on this particular public hearing. I'll turn it over to our moderator.
Thank you, Chair Buck. At this time, if you have registered to speak at the public hearing for the supplemental budget, please raise your virtual hand. Please note public comment will be handled as a separate item. This is just for the public hearing for the supplemental budget. So please raise your hand if you wish to give testimony on the budget. At this time, I do not see any hands raised, Chair Buck, so I will turn the meeting back over to you.
Okay, I will close the public hearing. And if there are no additional comments by staff, we can open it up for discussion and action by the board. Any comments or questions from anybody? I am not seeing or hearing any. So I'll ask if there is a motion to approve the supplemental order and resolution as submitted.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Commissioner Berney, second by Commissioner Bozievich. Any discussion? All right, I don't see or hear any, so I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right. Are there any adjustments to the remaining agenda items for today from anyone? Okay, I don't see or hear any. We'll move on to emergency business. We have a couple of items related to the Holiday Farm fire. The first item is Order 20-09-29-07 in the matter of increasing delegated authority to the county administrator to $1 million for responding to the effects of the Holiday Farm fire. And I'll turn this over to our county administrator, Mr. Mokrzycki.
Thank you, Chair. And I think do we have Dan Hurley? On the call for this item.
I do show Dan on the phone, but it does not look like he's speaking. Dan, you're self-muted at this time if you'd like to join in.
So let me just make a run at it, Chair. As the board knows, we've had now 3 weeks of response and starting to move into recovery work on the Holiday Farm fire. The fire is, and you'll hear this update in a little bit from Mr. Hurley, who is now our incident commander on the county's Fire Emergency Operations Center. The fire's 55% contained. It's burned about 174,000 acres in Lane County. Over 700 structures have been lost. A lot of damage, both to personal property as well as public utility and public safety communications and other infrastructure. And so the cost of the damage from this fire has piled up rather quickly. And so this delegation is to allow the county administrator to expend additional resources in response to the needs from this fire. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Mr. Dingle may be with us, and we'll try to get Mr. Hurley on the line if possible.
Any
Steve,
questions?
I'm on the line.
Oh, Dan, feel free. Why don't you go ahead and then we can ask some questions.
All right, sorry, I'm monitoring several things here in the EOC right now. So I missed the first part of that, but yes, this is a request to.
Dan, if you can just speak up. I imagine we're all having a little bit of a hard time hearing you.
Okay. All right, so I'm monitoring several things here in the EOC, so sorry I missed part of that. But yes, this is a request to increase the spending authority related to this incident. The initial authorization was for $500,000. We have gone over that by about $75,000, requesting $1 million authorization. This is to cover expenses that we're incurring related to staff overtime, equipment. For example, we've staged 4 Connex boxes to store the donated materials that came in from the community in response to this that we're moving upriver. So various expenses as this continues to move on.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? There is a lot happening in our EOC, which is now over at Public Works in our new location. if anybody hasn't seen it yet, it's quite impressive. I would recommend taking a peek at all their hard work. If there aren't any questions, I'll ask if there's a motion to approve Order 20-09-29-07 as presented.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Commissioner Burney, second by Commissioner Bozievich. Any discussion? I don't see or hear any, so I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. All right, we'll move on to item B, which is an action item in the matter of signing an agreement with the state of Oregon to jointly work on disaster debris management associated with the Holiday Farm fire. And it shows me. So I've been working on this over the weekend, and Mr. Dingle's here with us as well. The state of Oregon is working to leverage associated FEMA dollars for fires throughout the state in order to clean up hazardous waste and debris for those affected by the fire at no cost to the homeowner, instead of each county trying to determine how to do that on their own. I think this is a really good idea, and I have asked if we could participate, but we do need action from the board to get approval from everyone, or at least a majority. Hopefully it'll be unanimous. We don't certainly have the means here at our own landfill to put all the debris and hazardous material in it. And so they will be helping coordinate that at a state level and put it in an appropriate landfill. Mr. Dingle, do you want to add anything further to this particular agreement? You're on mute. If you could add your audio.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. To be clear, this was just a preliminary letter. We haven't seen the agreement, but I think I've been in conversations with other folks about it. I think it's a good idea. It does allow us to leverage a great deal of resources, and it helps make sure that this particular waste ends up where it's supposed to and not in places that we have to clean up as a secondary issue.
I saw Commissioner Sorensen's hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask Mr. Dingle or anyone that knows about this, is there a way for us to track how much of the money will go to public sector needs, such as utilities, where the utility is owned by a public entity, or a road or state highway or a county road or a school or other public entities, as opposed to private parties? And then I have a further question. Within the private sector, is there any way to distinguish between how much of the money will be used to deal with public sector responsibilities as opposed to private sector responsibilities?
This is Dan. I could speak to that unless anyone else would, but yes, that will all be tracked through the FEMA reimbursement process. We've gone through the first step of that reimbursement process in filing our initial damage assessment. That came in at about $24.4 million. About a little over $5 million of that was for public infrastructure. All the agencies will be, that's just our initial assessment. The agencies will be tracking their expenses over time and filing for reimbursement at the end of this. And so that will all be tracked, for all the different agencies that will be submitting for reimbursement.
What about for private sector? Will we be reimbursed for that, or will private sector insurance companies be billed for that, or how is within the private sector component of the money being spent? How would we assure that the money will be going for homeowners as opposed to large landowners or other large entities? How are we going to make sure that the money really goes for the benefit of the less fortunate of the people who've lost their homes in this tragic fire?
So I'm not really sure about large landholders. I can talk a little bit about the residential impacts. So FEMA, because this is a federally declared disaster, will be bringing funds to reimburse people for expenses. Insurance companies will need to reimburse first. FEMA won't be reimbursing for things that are already covered by insurance. And so FEMA will be working through that with individual people, they have their individual assistance program. They're setting up a facility in the next couple of days at the fairgrounds to start working with people individually to get them paired up with assistance. First for making sure that they have stable housing through the disaster, whether that's at a hotel through Red Cross, or if they'll be paying individual assistance so that they can find a rental apartment until they can get back into their home. But that'll all be working through the FEMA process. We're learning as we go here. That's probably as much as details I can give you for now, but we can give you more updates as we have periodic updates for the Holiday Farm fire. We're going to do an update in a little bit. That will give you kind of a broader scope of all the things that we've been working on with this, but I'll make sure that we dig into that specific issue and bring you more information at our next update.
FEMA sent the commissioners an email, and among the locations they stated they'd be available was the Graduate Hotel in downtown Eugene. What is happening at these facilities that FEMA mentioned?
Yeah, so they've set.
Dan, why don't we hold that question for your update so that we can move on with the particular emergency business item, and then we'll double back on that question when we get to our Holiday Farm fire update. I want to stay focused on this item first.
That sounds good, Chair.
Do you have a motion that you want? Is the motion made?
Yeah, I can mention that after Commissioner Bozovich speaks.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask real quick, we'll go entering into this agreement with the state on debris removal, force folks to remove foundations or other evidence of locations of structures and homes that may be needed to get the right to reconstruct. I'm greatly concerned about people's ability to rebuild their homes and getting proper documentation done. Is there any way that this agreement's going to suddenly have some of these home sites cleaned up before folks are able to document their existing square footprints, whether they're actually inside setbacks that were established post when their homes were built, that sort of thing. So can somebody address that for me?
I can speak to that, Commissioner. So no, it would not. So this initial request is around the hazardous waste cleanup. EPA will be working on that. They'll have contractors down here. And for each property, landowners will need to give a right of entry. So the state has just hired a contractor to work through that process to start working on getting people signed up for that. But this first phase is just to get the hazardous waste cleaned up. There will be a second phase that we don't have authorization for at this point with FEMA to work on the larger debris removal of the non-hazardous waste. But again, that will require authorization by the property owner to have that waste removed. So at that point, foundations could be removed if part of that debris removal piece, but that would be with authorization from the property owner.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All right. So the action, the board motion we really need today is for Lane County to participate with the state of Oregon in their disaster debris management. And what they're doing is asking each of the counties affected if they would like to participate so we can do this more efficiently. Commissioner Sorensen.
I move approval of the order as presented.
There isn't necessarily an order, so if you could reform that into a motion, that would be helpful.
I move approval of the, of directing staff to work on an agreement with the state to jointly work on disaster debris management associated with the Holiday Farm fire.
Chair Buck, if I can make a recommended suggestion,
Please.
I would just change the motion that was, or amend the motion that was made by Commissioner Sorensen to state that the board delegates authority to the board chair and or the county administrator and county staff to negotiate an agreement for basically the same thing the rest of what Commissioner Sorensen said.
I would like to make that amendment if the maker so approves.
That'd be great.
Is there a second?
I'll second all of those.
Very good. Thank you all. So we have a motion on the floor to delegate authority to either myself and or Mr. Mokrzycki to get into an agreement with the state of Oregon to jointly work on disaster debris management associated with the Holiday Farm fire. Any discussion? Commissioner Berney?
This is probably just a technicality, and if so, I apologize. But I want that motion to say the chair, because the chair may change while we're still within this period of time, or the county administrator. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So noted by the second.
Very good. Any other discussion? All right. There's no other discussion. We'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Those were important items for the EOC to continue forward. So at this point, we'll move on to item 4, which is employee recognitions. Mr. Mokrzycki.
Thank you, Chair. And in a moment, you'll be very pleased to know that I'm going to turn my camera off, and we're going to try to bring up the camera from the room. Yeah, right. No one wants to see me. We're going to try to bring up the camera from a room in the Charlton building where we have our case investigation team, so you all can see them. I want to first just start with a couple comments, and I'm going to allow folks to. So let me do this. Let me ask anyone other than the 5 commissioners who's on camera, who's not part of the case investigation team, to turn your camera off. Then I'll turn mine off in a second, and hopefully we'll be able to pop up with that team. I want to say first that we, our public health team has been going for a solid 7+ months managing this global pandemic. And it's been really incredible work. And of course, we're not out of the woods yet. We know that because our numbers are really concerning, have been really concerning over the last couple weeks. But we want to take the opportunity, and we're going to here in the coming weeks, to recognize folks behind the scenes who really have served as the unsung heroes of helping our community through this unprecedented challenge that we've seen. And I'm going to turn you first to a little hard to see for folks on the screen, but this is our 5 strategy plan for managing and defeating COVID-19 in Lane County. And at the top of it, the first strategic priority is contain the spread of disease, flatten the curve. First thing. And within that area of containing the spread, we have identified a specific strategy to conduct case contact investigations of known cases. So that is the team that we're going to recognize here today. Let's see if I can turn my camera off and we can see. There they are, our case investigation team. Wave your hands, folks, so we can see you all. It looks like they all have masks and they're so properly distanced from each other. And we want to just take a moment here to recognize this incredible team who's really been at the front lines of our COVID response. So our case investigation team is with us today, and these are individuals who receive the lab results. They reach out to those individuals who are newly diagnosed, and they determine where there might be other potential exposures so that we can quickly wrap around those individuals and pursue quarantine, testing, isolation, and other mechanisms in order to stop the spread of the disease. These staff excel for two reasons at the very least, both because they have great knowledge of public health protocols and investigatory guidance, but also because they have the ability to quickly develop rapport with people from all walks of life and to build trust. Build trust, that's a really important component as we're dealing with so many folks who themselves are going through great challenge and concern and stress and anxiety about this disease. And so that work to really build trust with these cases is just critical. We've had more than 1,000 people diagnosed with COVID in Lane County to date. Nearly all of those people have had in-depth conversations with our case investigators. And, you know, I know the board and the public can understand that this can be a frightening, stressful time for community members. This is new to all of us. And this staff that is leading our case investigation team bring accurate information and much needed support to people during a time of uncertainty and stress. Our investigators have interviewed people who have just lost loved ones, and they're able to provide solace, comfort, and solace and support in the understanding and the fact that the information gathered will help prevent further loss of life. To say that this work comes with heavy emotional burden would be an understatement. These individuals have borne a great burden for the sake of our community, and they've done it with grace and with resilience. And I'll remind you again, I know I've said it, but 7 months of this. These are folks who have been showing up for 7 days a week at the Charlton building since March. So, you know, we know that we all are wary of wearing masks and keeping distance, and we miss our family members, and we miss gatherings and sporting events and all these things that we love to do. And you know, I'll speak for I'm getting tired of it. I want life to go back to normal, but it's not back to normal. It's nowhere close to back to normal. We have a lot of work to do before we can even consider getting back to normal. And I just ask folks to consider this team here that's in the room, who's been showing up for 7 days a week since March, doing the hard work behind the scenes to contact individuals, to deal with family members, to have a sense of urgency. We've talked a lot about how this is a marathon. Karen often talks about this is an ultra marathon. I've run a marathon. I've never done an ultra marathon. I can't imagine what it is like for the folks every single day who are showing up for this period of time. And I think the challenge for a lot of folks in our public health team and these case investigators in particular is that in an ultra marathon, you sort of have to pace yourself, and it's not a sprint, right? You're not running at full speed every day, because you have to go the distance and understand we don't know when the light is at the end of the tunnel here. But they also have to focus on the urgency of the moment and knowing that every person they contact, and that there are other people they've had contact out there with, and really digging into all of that and having that urgency within each moment to know that, yes, we have to pace ourselves, but we also have to get on top of this and make sure that we understand that lives truly are at stake. So I just want to call that out for this team of the incredible work that they've done in both sprinting and ultra marathon, I guess, if that's possible. So these are staff that are on the phone with new parents, with long-term care facilities, with schools, with businesses, with hospitals, with sick individuals, working hard to identify contacts and make sure no one is missed. I want to just make a comment that, this pandemic is so frustrating because, and it's very easy for us to point fingers and say, well, why doesn't the county do this? Or why don't the schools do this? Or why don't, businesses do that? Or very easy for us to point fingers. At no time in the past 7+ months has our public health team pointed the finger at anybody. The fact of the matter is that Lane County doesn't have a significant amount of authority to impose decisions and actions on other entities. Our role in public health is primarily, the board does ultimately decide what phase we can move into, but our role in public health is primarily to advise, to take the guidance that has been provided by the state, by the Oregon Health Authority and the other state authorities, and to work collaboratively with our schools, with our businesses, with residents, to educate, inform, and to compel people to be diligent about following these guidelines. And so it's really this work. We talk about building trust that these folks do. We talk about the intensity and the complexity of making these contacts and identifying that really complex work of truly investigating where this disease is and tracking it down and trying to make sure that we get those people the isolation, the quarantine, the testing that's necessary. So this is an amazing, I could go on and on. If you don't want to hear me, I think we'd probably rather hear from Karen and clap for this group. But it really is an amazing team, a team of both seasoned veterans, as well as people who are new to public health. And as this pandemic has grown, the team has grown. They're always working hard to bring new people in and bring them up to speed quickly. And so we owe the Lane County COVID case investigation team a debt of gratitude, not only for serving our community, but for working to slow the spread of COVID-19 and doing so in a manner that exemplifies all of the wonderful attributes that we work to model here at Lane County: passion to serve, a drive to connect with others, and a focus on solutions. So thank you thank you for your hearts, for your minds, and most of all for your commitment to serve the people of Lane County. I want to turn it over. I see Karen. I think that's Karen with the mask on in the front row there. Karen, do you want to say some words here?
I think we can get the audio to work. Are we coming through on your end? Okay, great. And I'm not going to say much, Steve, because I think you've really captured the pieces I would want to highlight. I think it's important for the community and the board to understand not only the amazing work that this team does, but this is personal for people on this team. We're talking about public health professionals who are prepared and absolutely ready for this moment and deeply committed and a little bit fatigued, I have to say. It's been a long run the last 7 months, and I am just so proud of the amazing work that happens out of this team. And I think the embodiment of team has been really important for this group too, and that's why it's important for us that you see everyone here who's part of that work. And this is certainly just a small slice of our COVID response, but we've long said this is really our front line of that response. These are the people who are making that immediate contact and using their very best, not only analytical skills, but really persuasive skills to ask people, please tell us everyone you've been with, everywhere you've gone, and please listen to us and stay home, quarantine, isolate. Those messages coming from public health are making a huge difference in our community. So I've been so impressed and really honored to be able to work with this group of people and watch how they've come together as a team in doing that work. So thank you for taking time this morning to recognize their work, and I'll turn it over to the board for comments, I think.
Chair, real quick, I want to call out, actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to name the folks. After all, these are folks that have been on site regardless of COVID, smoke, and other challenges, and so we want to name them. I'd ask you all, if there are a couple folks I know that can't be with us today, but if you're able to raise your hand or stand, then we're going to invite each of them up to give a 10-minute speech on the importance of wearing your mask and keeping your distance. So you each have an opportunity to do that. Well, the chair's laughing, so I'm guessing that maybe isn't going to happen. So let me just name folks, and if you don't mind raising your hand or standing, whatever you're comfortable with. Carrie Joyce. Carrie there. Heather Young. Alice Kirby. I know Lisa Chambliss, I believe, is on maternity leave. Is that right? So she's not with us today. Michelle Hampton. Catherine Carvelli. Carolina Arredondo Sanchez Lira. Kate Blair. Kelby Land.
Where's Kelby?
Thekla Rhodes Pangle. Valerie Machado. Krista Barth. Tessa Frazon. Edgar Zaruza. Did I get that right? Zarazua. Edgar Zarazua. And, oh, Edgar is, I think Edgar maybe is not with us as well. Zane Keene.
Oh, sure. I'm exhausted.
And Connor Balderston. Did we miss anyone, Karen?
I think you got the room.
All
Thank
right.
you.
That's our case investigation team. How about all of us give a big round of applause to you? Okay, Chair, to you.
Well, thank you all. Commissioners, is there anybody who would like to say something to these nice folks? I'll start out at least by saying thank you, thank you, thank you. What you do is the hard work, and our community is so much better for it. I can't imagine doing your work. It's so tough to be able to make that call, and some people, I imagine, are quite shocked to get your call. And being able to empathize with them and let them know the right information is just key to helping us get through COVID. So all your hard work is just so appreciated, and it's our honor to recognize you today. Commissioner Berney?
For me, and I'm speaking to all of you, for me, one of the things that this crazy period has done is redefine what important and essential and the most meaningful work is among us. I've done construction work, and usually it's the engineers and architects and financiers and ownership group that do all the credit, get all the credit, but they really didn't do any of the work. It's building trades that build things. I've been in education, and oftentimes it's boards of education or administrators that get a lot of attention and get the public eye, but really education doesn't happen with any of them. Education only occurs between teachers and students. Conversely, or similarly, with all of you, we may have a board, I'm speaking only for myself, we may have a board of county public health. We have doctors, we have clinics, we have so much, but the work you are doing, as far as I am concerned, is Herculean. It is not work. It is literally giving of yourselves. I understand it takes a psychic as well as a physical, as well as an emotional toll. And I believe it is far more significant at this moment in time than the work that many of us that are sitting and making decisions are doing. So I, from the bottom of my heart, cannot thank you enough for giving yourselves at this moment of need. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Buck, and Co-Chair, Vice Chair Berney, for stating what we all believe and what we all think. I'll say something that an old colleague of mine used to say to me. His name was Jerry. He had a little company called Jerry's. I worked for him, and he always said, to the people with whom you come into contact, you will be the company. And what I'll say to you is the many people that you come into contact with, the competence of Lane County is demonstrated through your action and through your caring and the contacts that you make. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Sorensen.
First of all, I want to join in all the remarks of the commissioners in thanking all of you. I did want to mention one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet, and that is we are indebted to you, and the community is indebted to you for another reason, and that is that your work taken in total has saved lives, many lives. And I really appreciate the life-saving component to all of this, as well as everything else that's been said about your dedication. Thank you.
Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. And, I just want to say I agree with everything that's been said so far. The work you've been doing as I watch the county indicators that come out from the state every week. Every week we've seen our percent of cases in the last 7 days that we've been able to contact within 24 hours has been 95% or above until like this last week. We got down to a low of 92%. That's your work. You guys have done an amazing job of reaching out to these people, and not just in a single language, multilingual outreach, touching all of our communities in Lane County. And, I've explained to people before that, Oregon in general has had a fairly low case rate, low death rate compared to the rest of the nation. But Lane County has been well below the state averages in all of this. And it's the work you all have been doing. I like to tell people we're living in one of the safest counties and one of the safest states in the nation. And that has been because of the work that you've done. It's really been pretty incredible how low our case rate has been, how low our death rates have been. And it's really all about, that contact tracing and case investigation work you've done, and just the cooperation of our citizens in the work that you've been doing. So thank you for the work you do. You truly have saved lives.
Absolutely. Thank you all again. We appreciate you taking a moment of pause here with us just to recognize all your hard work. And with that, I think we will continue on with our meeting after a final thank you. All right. We will move on in our agenda to item 5, which is public comments. So I'll turn this over to our moderator.
Thank you, Chair Buck. At this time, if you've signed up for public comment, I will call if you would raise your virtual hand, and I will call upon you for public comment. You will have 3 minutes to give public comment. Once I call your name, I will unmute you and I will start the timer, and you may begin your public comment. I will start with, and I apologize for messing up anybody's names. Chris Lavoie. I will unmute you and you may begin your public comment.
Thank you. I just want to say to everybody, I really appreciate the work you're doing. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges we're all experiencing, especially this year, and a lot of problems to solve with sometimes a lot of scarcity in resources. I own the former ranger station in Blue River, the McKenzie River Mountain Resort. It was 95 or 85% burnt and taken out by the fire. Some of you may have heard me on an NPR interview about the fire right after it happened. I've been a volunteer board member for McKenzie Chamber and for the McKenzie River Community Development Corporation. I'm not here as an official representative of those organizations, but my comments reflect the feelings of most people involved in those organizations, and my comments are enriched based on those years of service. Blue River's location, that's gorgeous. It was platted over 100 years ago, time when zoning and building codes were non-existent. Since then, we have implemented building codes and zoning that has rendered most of the lots in the town as unbuildable for any practical purposes. I understand the code has grandfathered let people rebuild exactly what they had. The challenge is that economically, if we don't do something to change the situation, there's no way that Blue River is going to get any better. Not everybody will rebuild, and again, economic viability won't happen. We need to find a way to fix that. I believe there's probably a lot of small unincorporated towns in most of your districts throughout the county that could probably use some help with staff time and planning to help create solutions for problems. Right now, planning is all based on fees, and we've been asked to solve those problems as a community, as volunteers, and we've been working really hard on it. But putting a community sewer in is what our town needs to fix the problem and the leaky drain fields that are threatening to contaminate Eugene's drinking water. Relying on a few of us retired folks and those of us who own businesses that are working our butts off just to stay afloat, to be able to put something like this in place is just a nearly impossible task. We need some staff time to help. I'm hopeful that as a result of whatever money might be available through FEMA and whatever, that some staff time can be set aside to help us work through these problems and make the place better, help solve some problems with affordable housing and stuff like that by just creating those lots and making them buildable. So those are my thoughts and comments, and I do hope that in this big process that we're doing, that we can incorporate that into the mix for solving and fixing the problem with the fires. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, I will call Kale Zuschlag. Kale, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. Kale, it does look like you're self-muted at this time. If you can unmute, there you go.
Thank you for the unmute, and thank you, Chair Buck and Board of Commissioners, and a special thanks to the case investigation team for all that they're doing. My name is Kale Zuschlag. I am the Assistant Business Manager of IBW 280, the electrical workers in the Willamette Valley in Central Oregon. I sit on the board of Lane County Building Trades, as well as the Oregon State Building Code Structures Board, as well as the State Construction Energy Board. But my primary goal is representing working families in our communities. I want to thank the county staff and commissioners in their efforts to use capital improvement projects to lift up our communities. Thank you, and especially in these challenging times. Your efforts towards a community benefits agreement clearly shows that Lane County deeply cares about its working families. I appreciate the efforts county staff has put into crafting and proposing thoughtful, new policy. In these strange times, the family health plan component seems especially important, and I appreciate those efforts. Thank you. I would ask that the commissioners don't choose too high a threshold for these beneficial policies to kick in. Prevailing wage, which not a ton of people fully understand, kicks in on projects exceeding $50,000 for the county. Prevailing wage in Lane County is already structured around a lot of these benefits, so project labor costs would not increase after the $50K threshold. That being said, setting too low a threshold could burden county staff on small everyday projects with new policies to implement. And I know that workability is very important on something like this, especially when it's something new. I'd ask that the county to consider a reasonable threshold of $250,000 on total project costs. This would not interfere with day-to-day projects, but would capture enough to make a significant effect in Lane County. With that, I think I'm well below my time limit, but I just want to thank you guys for the opportunity to speak and for your dedication to the residents of Lane County and the working families here. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comments. This time I will call on Darren Busich. Darren, I will unmute your microphone and reset the timer, and you may begin your public comment.
Yeah, good morning. Darren Busich, Fire Chief for McKenzie Fire Rescue. I know this is one big disastrous fire, but it affected two fire districts quite a bit. Just to give you a quick, we run from Springfield city limits up to about Blue River. Our district lost close to 260 homes, not including about 300 outbuildings. And a lot of those folks have the questions of concern. And unfortunately, I get to field most of those calls. And they ask me if they can rebuild, and I don't have any answers for them. And my answer is, I hope you can. And I know there's a lot of fees already out there that the county said they can't waive until commissioners give them the green light. But we're getting people that are being charged to put their RVs on their spots right now. The cleanup effort, people, I'm asking them to slow down. They want to clean their house up as soon as possible. I know the commissioners have a plan, and I hope it works out with FEMA and everybody else. But anything we can do to get people back to some sort of normal life would be great. I know it's a big ask, but my ask is, there was a home there before. I hope they're allowed to build it again. I sent a letter to all the commissioners. It was pretty basic, probably too basic. I could have added more to it, but that's my ask. That's my ask as a fire chief. That's my ask as a community member. Before I forget, I listened to the COVID team and my appreciation for the COVID team as well. When this thing started, I spent 2 weeks in King County early March, and can't believe we're still here doing this today. But and to be honest, we took a little break and kind of forgot about COVID during this fire, and I know it's still there. I watch the news and see it every night. So appreciation to the county. The sheriff, this is for most of us, this is a first time adventure here. And working with the sheriff, all his deputies, the emergency manager, Patient Winningham, search and rescue crews, the road crews, everybody stepped up. I know I lost my cool a few times. I've had some apologies out there, but in the end, we were fortunate. No loss of life is okay, but we were very fortunate not to have any more than we did. And I tell you, for my crews, my volunteers, my paid staff, couldn't be more proud and nervous as well. I mean, for the first 48 hours, we kind of were running all different directions. And when it was all over with, I was very thankful that we didn't have any injuries or major issues amongst our department. So you're going to get a lot of requests about this, but I'm looking for the quick waive of some of these simple permit fees to get people a chance to move back on their properties with a fifth wheel or something like that. Let's work with some of these septic issues in the temporary. I know the long term, there's no simple solution, but again, thank you for your time and all you folks have done, county, state, federal wise, and it looks like my clock is running out. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you for your public comments. At this time, I do not show any more hands raised requesting to speak at public comment. I will open it up one more time. If you would like to give public comment at this time, please raise your virtual hand and I will call upon you. Chair Buck, I do not see anyone else raising their hand, so I will turn the meeting back over to you.
Very good. Thank you all for your public comment. And we'll turn this over to Commissioner's response or remonstrance. And I will say a little something at the end regarding the building codes and permitting process. Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say thank you to Chris and Darren. I ran into Darren out there at the Emergency Operations Center at the middle school, and he expressed that concern to me early on in the fire about reconstruction. And I am planning on, when we get to the point of the meeting where it's agenda team request, I'm going to ask for several agenda team items to be placed on in the future, one of which will be dealing with the planning issues around this and having a work session with staff to talk about what things the county can do as far as assumptions go around legal lots, setbacks, and other things that we can establish to make it easier for folks to rebuild, as well as what legislative priorities we need to add to our legislative priorities to have maybe the state affirm some planning issues that we don't have the power to waive at the county level. Second, I'd like to see us have a second work session on how we are going to relieve building permit fees where we might be able to get revenue to replace, because our building department is an enterprise department, so we can't waive them without replacing them. And then also how we are going to work on speeding up the process, whether we have to borrow staff or contract out staff from other jurisdictions. We've got 400 homes that need to be rebuilt. And right now our permit review process is well beyond what Cottage Grove's is, which is just a few weeks. So we need to try and take a page maybe from Cottage Grove and maybe borrow some staff from Cottage Grove and get those permits to be issued faster. And then finally, I'd like us to have some kind of joint work session with the Eugene Water and Electric Board and maybe their staff about how we can utilize maybe FEMA money and watershed protection money from EWEB to help people install advanced wastewater systems. A lot of these older homes were built with septic systems that wouldn't be approved under today's code. And the only way to get an approved septic system is to go to a highly advanced systems, sand filters, et cetera. Those are expensive. And finding some way to help homeowners get to that, as well as looking at even small community systems like Blue River. We have helped out other small community systems in the past, like the Dexter Sanitary District, get control of some of their infiltration inflow problems. So I think we need to take a hard look at what we can do to help them out. But all three of those things need to be dealt with. There's planning roadblocks possibly in the way. There's building permit fees that are going to be an added burden to folks that have been victimized by these fires, as well as we want to make sure we have the homes that get put back there not be contributing to polluting the watershed and drinking water for approximately 160,000 people in Eugene. So I'll be asking for work sessions on all three of those items when we get to that portion of our meeting.
Very good. Any other comments or remonstrance? Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much. The Board of Commissioners, when it looked like we were getting a handle on the COVID problem, approved board order telling the state that we had achieved a degree of containment for the disease, and we wanted to, quote, open up. And there was a great clamor, and the board approved unanimously the request to have the state, quote, open up Lane County. But at the time, we were told that if the problem got worse, the board and public health would revisit that. Well, in my view, it has gotten worse. The number of infectious cases at the time was quite low. Now the number of infectious cases is quite high. And I believe that, as was stated earlier, the mission is to contain the spread, and we have not been doing a good job of that. Not because we haven't tried, but because the public isn't following the recommended guidelines of the CDC. And I think it's incumbent upon the Lane County Public Health, as well as the Board of Commissioners, to initiate a local public health ordinance that would put in law an infraction, a penalty of an infraction for violating the masking and social distancing requirements. I don't get out very much because of my own risk, but whenever I do go out, I see constantly people not wearing masks and not social distancing. And to me, the simple additional thing we could do is to create an infraction, a penalty, a local penalty, because there really isn't any enforceable federal or state rules. And in my view, we need to do this. We need to step in and make it clear that it's not just a guideline, it is a law that people must follow. And I think that the board should pursue this And I welcome support on the board for the idea that we would make it the law of the land. True, not a criminal law, nothing something where the heavy hand of the law is going to come down on people and it's going to be a crime, but rather that law enforcement would have the authority to issue infractions and tickets to people that just flout the rule and help us and prevent us from doing our main thing, which is trying to, contain the spread. Thank you.
Commissioner Burney.
First, I would like to say to the first gentleman, I believe Mr. LeBoy that spoke, I think he makes a really good point. I know that in next week, I believe, or soon, we're going to be looking at economic development dollars that are typically involved in rural economic development, tourist development. I know that we have access, I don't know the specifics, but to local FEMA dollars and still CARES Act dollars. And if there is any way to use any of those resources to provide the planning and logistics assistance to communities to rebuild, I think, and to think it through. I took a note that said planning is based on fees, not on solutions when he was speaking. I think it behooves us to attempt to do that with all earnestness. To Cale Zuschlag, I want to say that we'll be discussing the community benefits agreement. The board knows that I've been working very closely with you, but one thing he mentioned that I just share as a prologue to that is that the building trades have been working as a result of Mr. Mokraheisky's kind of bringing the right people from the right departments, including legal, so that what we will be discussing this afternoon, which Cale was addressing, is a real opportunity to walk our talk in such a way that it increases no costs to the right building projects, but nonetheless puts money behind priorities this board has long stood for. So I'm enthused for that discussion. And finally, I will nod my head when Commissioner Bozievich asks for those work sessions, although I would like to say, rather than demonstrating my lack of knowledge and talking about specific ways, which I know we have the knowledge base here, I do want to say that the bottom line is increasing the capacity, increasing the efficiency, and looking at ways to waive unnecessary requirements to help people get themselves back home. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Farr. We need your audio.
Thank you. You can't read my lips, eh? My lips speaking an English accent. The first thing I'd like to mention is Chris Lavoie. Chris, there's something that you said that really particularly struck home to me. You had a number of different things to say, which have been commented on by both Commissioner Bozievich and Commissioner Burney. But something that you said, my comments are enriched by my years of service. And that is such a true statement. You speak with the experience of actually living in the area, doing things on the ground level. And as we all have acknowledged, it's the people at the ground level that are doing the work, not the people sitting in chairs or shuffling paper. You're the one doing the work. So your years of experience not only enrich your words, it enriches your actions. Thank you for being there. You brought up some very interesting points, which were once again commented on by both Commissioner Bozievich and Commissioner Burney. And Commissioner Burney and Bozievich and the other commissioners that I serve with, I feel particularly enriched by the fact that we have such deep and broad experience in areas. Commissioner Burney, you talk about community benefits in your response to Mr. Zuschlag, and we'll talk about that later. Commissioner Bozievich, you talk about engineering, and you bring an engineer's eye to how do we recover. You're not just looking at it from a novice point of view. You're looking at it from an engineer's point of view. And engineers are going to be so necessary in making sure that we go down the right path, we expend our resources in the right areas, and that ultimately we rebuild as well as we possibly can. Along those lines, I'm going to sadly make a statement regarding the passing of one of our great local civil engineers, Tom Pogue. I attended a service for Tom Pogue last year. Tom was my representative on the Roads Advisory Committee for 8 years, and Tom passed away after a battle with cancer at 79 years old. He'll be remembered not only through his actions and his deeds, but through buildings, roads, and public works throughout Lane County, where he's been working for so many years. To Tom's Pogue and Tom's family and his associates, we will miss you dearly, not only as an engineer, but as a truly great human being. Thank you, Chair Buck.
Thank you all. And I appreciate everybody's public comment, specifically regarding the building codes for rebuilding. We are starting to get a core team of folks that are specifically looking at all that encompasses the task of rebuilding. There will be some time where we need to deal with the waste management first, which will go in a couple of phases, as I've understood from the conversations with the state. In the meantime, this is our time to have those discussions with the building codes team. I still feel strongly that we need to shore up that building code team to look, so we have some experts that really understand what it's going to take for the McKinsey, while the rest of our staff can continue on with their regular work. We have Alex Kyler currently looking into what's going to be on the next legislative front regarding this, because we're not the only county that's been affected, right? So there's a lot of folks that are very interested at the state level in the exact same subjects that we're going through. So it's going to be really important that we glean that information and come together as counties going through the exact same tasks, knowing that we are each different, but at the same time, going through the very similar stages of the rebuilding and recovery phases. We also will have an economic recovery council. And it's really important that we at the ground level, and not just, county representatives, but people in the actual fire zone are included in those discussions, so that folks putting together policy at the state level for the upcoming session in 2021, that they have the experiences from the ground up. So I just wanted to share that many things are in the works, but we have to do, the work here as well. And to Kale, I appreciate hearing from you, and know that I am 100% supportive of our community benefits agreements efforts here at the county. Look forward to that conversation a little later today. Are there any other final comments or remonstrance from anybody? Okay, well, we'll move into our updates. So first we have the Holiday Farm fire update with Mr. Mokryski. You can start us off. I know Dan Hurley and Chief Deputy Wilkerson are with us as well.
They are. Thank you, Chair. And just briefly, I'll say that we talked about COVID being an ultramarathon, and it's been a true sprint over the last 3 weeks on the Holiday Farm fire, and really incredible work by various partners in the community. You heard from a fire chief under public comment, Sheriff's Office, ODF, Oregon State Fire Marshal, federal agencies. And then our team here in Lane County, we stood up an emergency operations center on Labor Day as the winds picked up. And so we were ready, and, road crews and Sheriff's Office out there clearing roads and making sure people had the ability to get out. So when you hear the chief earlier talk about one fatality, it really is remarkable. And we've had a number of folks at the state and federal level say, we're going to study this fire, because to have over 700 structures destroyed and only one fatality is really a remarkable thing to happen. So while there has been great damage to the McKenzie Valley as a result of this fire, we are very fortunate that we only had one loss of life. So we are now on Friday. We transitioned from a focus on immediate response to more of a short and long-term recovery. And so Chief Deputy Wilkerson, who served as our incident commander for the first 3 weeks of the fire, handed the baton over to Dan Hurley on Friday. So Dan, our Public Works Director, is now serving as our incident commander, and I'll turn it over both to Chief Deputy and to Dan to talk about that kind of pivot and sort of where our focus is going to be now in terms of recovery for the McKenzie Valley.
I think I'll just go ahead and kick this off. Good morning, commissioners, Chair Buck. I just kind of wanted to, our game plan was to give you a quick recap of what the first 3 weeks looked like before we transitioned to Dan's conversation. September 7th, Labor Day weekend, Labor Day, we had a notice of some pretty extreme wind. And thankfully, our emergency manager put together a pre-planning session and got all the right people on the phone and made some plans to include our search and rescue coordinators, sheriff's office, public works, to make up some plans of what are we going to do if we started having some damage due to the wind event. Because of that phone call, we had some resources in the right areas, and unfortunately the fire kicked off, and it spread extremely fast. But because of that phone call that patients made, we were able to, the sheriff's office, public works, our fire department partners, our state police partners, were able to do some aggressive evacuations, and it basically evacuated the McKenzie Valley for the next 24 hours. As the county administrator mentioned, over the course of the next week, we lost over 700 structures. I think we're still trying to determine how many millions and millions of dollars of loss we've had. But because of that quick reaction and some, to be quite frank with you, some very heroic actions of all of our partners, Sheriff's Office, Oregon State Police, Public Work Partners, and others, to date, we are at 1 confirmed fatality and 0 missing persons. In the last 3 weeks, we kind of started shifting from that immediate response into kind of what the long-term looks like. We have, as you guys are all aware, we stood up the MARC, the Multi-Agency Resource Center, started working with FEMA to try to get all of our people who have been displaced by the fire to sign up with FEMA for their registration so that they can start getting assistance there. And we started providing mental health services and other human services for those affected by the fire. We've had some great partnerships in my first 3 weeks with the Red Cross, FEMA, and the incident command team at the fire. During the course of this time, over 1,000 feet have been on the ground of fire resource, over 7,000 hours of law enforcement patrols, either manning traffic control points or doing patrols of the affected areas, trying to prevent any of the various crimes that can occur because of this, unfortunately, and trying to just help the communities. The Sheriff's Office specifically has redesignated one of our limited patrol resources to be a resident deputy in that area to work directly with those affected by the fire. And we picked our guy who was up there before, who already has a strong relationship with that valley. And we're hoping that that will help ease some of the concerns by the community up there. We really have transitioned. We had 0 areas that are considered an evacuation level right now. We are all back to 0. And it was kind of time to transition into where do we go from here. We still have part of the highway closed down by ODOT as they're trying to clear the highway and make it safe. It was affected and will continue to be affected by the fires, which obviously changed the landscape, which will continue to have issues with slides and other issues. And ODOT is working tirelessly on that. But like I said, that was a quick overall of what the last 3 weeks looked like. And we knew there was time to transition over to Mr. Hurley and Mr. Hurley's team, because the focus now obviously is recovery, and his aptitude and his expertise is far greater than mine in those areas. And I'm just trying to serve a softball so that Dan can take over and kind of explain to you where we go from here. So unless you have questions, I'll turn it over to Dan.
Great. Thank you, Chief Deputy, and thank you to you and all of the life safety team that did such an awesome job getting people out of the area and getting to only having one fatality on this huge event. Some updated statistics around the incident. You can find, we posted some material. We didn't get to Diana until this morning, but there is an updated summary on the web there that you as the board can review, and the public that has a lot of information at a high level about the incident. The fire burned about 174,000 acres as of this morning. We've heard that it's about 55% contained. There's still quite a bit of work to be done. There were about 260 miles of perimeter that the firefighters need to go through and make sure that all the hot spots are addressed. It's my understanding that there are still over 300 personnel working that perimeter. We do have a few days into our mid 80s with low humidity, so people are still on alert and concerned that the fire could reignite. But they're doing terrific work to get that contained. Again, spoke about our initial damage assessment being submitted. That was about $24.4 million. Structures destroyed 768. As Chief Deputy said, we're shifting from the response into the recovery effort. The incident command post is still operational, but we've moved the coordinating meetings over to the Lane County Emergency Operations Center. And we're stepping up task forces to coordinate the ongoing recovery work. Those task forces center around housing, human services, debris management, and watershed stabilization. We're working with EWEB to likely lead that last task force around the watershed pieces. Some updates around mass care. So Red Cross is coordinating the sheltering. Currently, there are 678 people housed in hotels, and in 16 different hotels they're coordinating. We've had to shuffle people around quite a bit, unfortunately, with availability in the hotels and U of O's move-in and limited availability. But that's stabilized. It sounds that we have stabilization in the hotels. There may be a few moves still, but through the end of next month. And Red Cross has committed that they will continue to provide services until folks are in longer-term shelter. Evacuation notices all have been lifted. They were lifted on 9/25. Access up Highway 126 is still very limited. ODOT is running just specific hours east and west and only for residents to get up into that area, urging the public to try to stay away and give people that time to be up there without the public taking pictures, and people need to get up there and grieve and have some time to sift through to find some things that they can bring back for memories. So if people could respect that, that would be appreciated. The hours for 126 are changing frequently, so people are encouraged to check tripcheck.com to check those hours as this moves forward. ODOT is working very hard to address the hazards that remain and get 126 open. All county roads at this point are open, but we have posted signs to alert people that there are still hazards in the area and to use extreme caution. Sheltering and support services. So we have FEMA working to get people signed up for assistance. They're staged at the Graduate Hotel and upriver at the McKenzie Bridge Community Center. Red Cross is coordinating food delivery at the various hotels. We have, again, the Multi-Agency Resource Center that's been operating the last few Fridays and a few days when this first started in conjunction. The next mark will be this Friday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. for residents to access various services, including FEMA counseling services. There are volunteers coordinating donations, so lots of services trying to wrap around the community there. This will be our last mark that's scheduled. It's likely that we'll do a scaled down version that will push upriver, but right now with hundreds of people in the hotels around Eugene, we've kept the mark at the Lane Event Center. Animal sheltering, our folks at Lane County Animal Services did a fantastic job stepping up and coordinating volunteers. There were at one point over 600 animals at the Lane Event Center, and Lane Event Center staff also accommodating all these needs for meeting spaces and animals in disaster. There are only about 30 animals left remaining, and most of those are cats and dogs. And we're working with Green Hill to try to reunite those with their owners. They're also doing rescues upriver. We have lots of support trying to be extended to survivors. There's crisis counseling. We've had counselors through Health and Human Services and our partners at the hotels and trying to reach out and offer people those services. Power, there are still about 250 customers upriver without power. The Lane Electric, eWeb crews are working around the clock to try to restore power in those areas where it is still down. Communications has been a continuing challenge. We lost one of our major radio relay facilities. CenturyLink's lines are destroyed in many areas, and it's going to take more than a month to repair. We've moved several cellular assets into the area, so that's improving. We expect to have a map of coverage in the next day or two. Economic impacts, we've had 25 businesses that were destroyed from the fire, and then even some of those that are remaining. One resident talked about how her business, the Vita Cafe, remained, although she lost her home, but with no customers to support the cafe, there's continual struggle on the economic front. And of course, all the tourism activity that the McKenzie Valley generated has an impact, not only to that community, but the tourism, the tax revenue that is generated affects Lane County as well. For public information, we have been operating a website, lanecounty.org/McKenzie-Fire, and we're encouraging people to use that as their primary source of information. We're keeping that updated on a regular basis. We also are using our Facebook and Twitter sites to get information out to people. We were operating a call center. We had over 600 calls a day. Lots of county employees, particularly from the sheriff's office, were staffing that and did a fantastic job fielding all those calls. We stood up a dashboard that contains pictures of each property and the damage so that people can start filing their insurance claims. The call center volumes dwindled to just a handful over the weekend. However, we saw a spike yesterday, so we're continuing to monitor that line with one staff person, trying to answer people's remaining questions. So just some key messages so we talked about housing, still working that with Red Cross. Human Services, FEMA will be setting up an outreach center at the fairgrounds in the next couple of days to start working with people, doing casework to make sure that they've applied for assistance, and there's disaster unemployment service. We'll also be co-locating Lane County staff for casework and counseling services. And debris management, we're urging people to wait for now and stay out of the hazards. A lot of that burned material may contain asbestos, may contain hazardous chemicals or contents, and we're urging people not to go in and rush and clean that up. If they do, we may not be able to take that waste at our landfill because our landfill is not a hazardous waste landfill. So EPA is expected to start an assessment of all properties in the next couple of weeks and working on right of entry for them to do those assessments and then carry out the cleanup at no cost to the property owner on the hazardous waste piece. We're waiting on the second piece, the non-hazardous. We're working with FEMA. We're trying to get an authorization for funding on that as well, so that could be at no cost to the property owner. A lot of work still to do on that front. The land use issues, you've talked a little bit about that. We are planning to come back to the board. We've scheduled on October 27th. I know there's a lot of concern about whether people will be able to rebuild and what's allowable by our code. We're also very interested in that and what we can do to expedite where possible, but also build for resilience where we rebuild. There are issues around fees we need to discuss as well, and that could be at the same time or sooner if you would like. We're limited in what we can do with fees. Fees are set by the board. Those fees are intended to pay for our staff costs. Land management in particular already was being subsidized. The fees don't cover their costs. They're subsidized by about $1 million a year with a fee collected at the transfer stations in conjunction with the tipping fee. So we do have concerns about waiving fees, but we do want to do whatever we can to make the rebuilding process easier for the affected folks. So we'll need to have some in-depth conversations on that with you, the board. And I'll stop there and field your questions at this time.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments? I'll just start out at least sharing some of the things that I've been working on in the last couple of weeks while this fire's occurred. Some of my fellow commissioners know what I've been working on too. I've gotten clearly numerous phone calls and emails from constituents up and down the river from the beginning, and that continues on. So I do field those quite often. We've had several internal county meetings, several community meetings that I've been at, and of course we've had numerous elected officials come through town. So I've been working with them, and if they've come to visit the Mark, where I've been at as well. So you know, there's travel time. I've been at the incident command quite often, and some commissioners have been able to come and support me there, and been on the meetings with the EOC. And thank you to other commissioners who've been able to listen in on some of those meetings. So I've been thoroughly immersed in this Holiday Farm fire since it started, and will continue to be involved and work with people on recovery. And if there's times when I need to reach out for fellow commissioners to cover meetings that are at the same time, I thank you for that help. And I also thank the Sheriff's Office very much for a resident deputy up there. I cannot tell you how many people are appreciative of that. Any other comments or questions regarding the Holiday Farm fire update? Okay. Oh, Commissioner Bray.
I would just like to add that Chair Buck was kind enough to deploy me to some of the meetings at Thurston Middle School. It's about 1/10 the time from my place as it is from her. So I thank her for, and I also am aware that Commissioner Bozovich made a very long drive for several days attending that. One of the things I got out of that, Chief Deputy Wilkerson, was not only the unbelievable interagency support and coordination, not only the expertise and person power brought from fire departments from Canada throughout Oregon. I mean, it was just amazing. But it was also very clear their respect for and appreciation for the role the Lane County Sheriff's Department was playing as it related to that. And I just want to acknowledge that. There was not one incident cooperators meeting I attended at the middle school where either Sheriff Harold was not a part of the presentation, and he and you were not called up by other incident commanders with appreciation. So I simply wanted to make that point. I also wanted to say that I'm going to be very interested in how we put flesh around the bones of the phrase "build for resiliency" and build quickly for resiliency. So I just wanted to make those two comments, and I thank Chief Deputy for the presentation.
Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Sorensen. Need your audio.
Sorry about that. Just wanted to ask a question about the debrief on the fire and who might be able to answer the question. Sometimes we can learn lessons from catastrophes and tragedies, and I'm wondering where the assessment or analysis of what we've learned about either the fire or the recovery from the fire that could be helpful in guiding the board on future challenges. So are there plans to rebuild the whole valley, or figure out why certain structures burned and others didn't, and what this might mean to future planning efforts? I'm just curious who would be able to answer that at this point.
Commissioner, I can speak to that. Those are issues that we're thinking about now. We are planning to do an after-action review of the initial response effort to learn lessons from that. But then as we're looking forward on recovery and resilience, did speak with our policy lab folks. This is our partnership with the 3 p.m. program at the University of Oregon. They do work for us around analysis on specific policy issues. So we're considering bringing them on with different student groups and faculty to look at those issues around building for resilience, to be able to learn from the California fires, to do some analysis of our FireWise program to find out which properties had utilized that and what was the outcome post-fire, if those measures were protective. So those are a few of the areas where we're planning to look at analysis to see how we can be smart moving down the road in the wake of this fire.
Who's on the? I can hear some noise or something. Who's not muted here?
That's probably me, just in the EOC.
Okay.
There are about 30 people in the room here, so it's a noisy place. Sorry.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I'll just mention one last thing is we're going to have the cooperators meeting closeout tomorrow for the Holiday Farm fire at Lively Pavilion. And so that will be virtual for folks, and that will kind of close out ODF's incident management team. They've been working very diligently since it first began, and now that we're in recovery mode, they will be doing a wrap up. So that should be actually around 10:30 tomorrow virtually. Hopefully we can get some links out for people to watch. I got both of you up, so I'll go Commissioner Farr and then Commissioner Bozovich.
Then I shall be very brief, and I'll just talk about the housing situation. With the destroyed structures, the destroyed homes up in the Mackenzie Valley, are already stressed housing situation in Lane County, and particularly in the metropolitan area and outlying cities, is further stressed. We have an additional, maybe as many as 600 households looking for a place to live, to be combined with the people who not only seek a permanent place to live, but also seek shelter as we move toward the winter. We have a number of people who, a lot of people who were sheltered during the smoke event. The smoke event is over right now, but the surrounding events will continue. And Chair Buck, I know that you're aware of the fact that we're working right now on replacing the Egan warming centers for the winter. They will not be operating this winter for the emergency shelter because of the distancing requirements of COVID-19 and other requirements. So as more people join the ranks of unhoused people in Lane County, it further elevates the attention we need to pay to not only shelter and not only transitional housing, but also permanent housing. We're all aware of this, but right now it's particularly heightened in my awareness because we have a lot of new people who will be who don't have the experience of being unhoused before, who are now unhoused. And it's we have to pay very strict and close attention to that as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you. And while we have Chief Deputy here and we're transitioning to Dan, I want to just take a moment to thank the Chief Deputy for his leadership in the EOC in the early part of this crisis, and also to thank Sheriff Cliff Harold. I have been attending the cooperators meetings virtually quite a bit, and I also got a chance to watch press conferences and all that. And Sheriff Harold and Chief Deputy have both been incredible leaders in the response. And I just want to thank you guys. And I also want to take a minute to thank Link Smith with ODF for his incident command. We were fortunate to get him on our fire. Link has got a long experience of running fire teams and ICS structures. And we're fortunate that he is actually local here in the West Lane ODF office. So we're happy to loan our West Lane guy over to East Lane for this fire. But Link and his team just did a great job with this fire. And I just want to have a chance to say thank you to him, thank you to the sheriff, thank you to the chief deputy, and to all the first responders. I work a lot with some of the news media and talking with them and the differing experiences around the state with these fires. Lane County had a far different experience, thanks to patience, thanks to the chief deputy, thanks to the sheriff, thanks to our first responders doing that pre-planning and the work we've done over time to be resilient. The work that we started, and Commissioner Farr remembers the first year I was chair, I dedicated it to resilience and emergency planning. And I think some of that paid off with this. There were other counties that never even got an emergency broadcast out. And the only warning people got was neighbors knocking on their door and telling them to get out. That wasn't necessarily what happened here. We did a much more proactive job in our evacuations, and it shows with just one single fatality in such a huge and fast moving fire. I just can't say enough about everything that the team has done in the early hours and what our ODF partners have been able to do since then. You guys have done a great job. And I know a lot of the people that were in this EOC had been serving in the Emergency Operations Center for COVID and got transferred over, and they were already tired when this started. So you guys have done incredible work in extreme fatigue and stressful situations. And I can't thank you enough on behalf of Lane County for the incredible response that you've made to this fire.
Hear, hear. Absolutely. Okay. Well, with that, we will move on to our other emergency, COVID-19 response and recovery. Mr. Mokrycki.
Thank you, Chair. And Ms. Gaffney is with us. I just want to make a couple of introductory comments here. I think that you're going to hear from Ms. Gaffney, our incident commander on the COVID Emergency Operations Center, about the significant increase that we've seen in Lane County for 7 months has remained below state and national averages. We've really, we have done a great job of limiting the spread of the disease. And we now, over the last couple of weeks, have hit a point where our numbers have steadily increased. So today is going to be a bit of a reality check and a reminder to the community that we really need to get serious about this problem. I made comments earlier about how we're all sick of wearing masks and staying apart from each other. I miss my mom, who I haven't seen in a year. We all miss sports and the things that we're used to doing. And it is disheartening, I will say, to see, folks in the community who are actively participating and wearing masks and keeping distance and following all those guidelines, and then others that are not. And I appreciate Commissioner Sorensen's comments earlier, and I think he's absolutely right that, the county and our partners, between the schools and various agencies have done everything that we can do with the tools that we have available to us. And it really is, as the board knows, our 5-point plan of focusing on containing the spread, ensuring healthcare providers and first responders have what they need, minimizing economic impacts on businesses and individuals, providing public information and guidance, and then preparing for the fall and winter. The one tool that the board does have available to it, we can't tell schools whether or not they have to open or close a school. We don't have that authority. We can't regulate a lot of these individual behaviors. We can't be the mask police that are going out and catching whether or not people are wearing masks or with a tape measure measuring how far apart people are. We have to really compel folks to participate in those activities, and we appreciate how great our community has been up to this point, but it's pretty clear that we've seen some relaxing of behaviors. I'll tell you, I just received a message from a CEO of a local business this morning who asked me who's in charge of youth sports in general. It's frustrating to see so many flag football teams practicing, no masks, pulling flags off each other. Who can I reach out to contact? And this person is a parent of a young person, of a child who plays soccer and feels like this soccer team is adhering to those guidelines. But we're seeing a variation here across the spectrum. Whether it's youth sports, you saw the article in the paper today. Kids sports has now started football up after the Oregon School Activities Association postponed fall high school sports 6 weeks ago. Kids sports has locally started that back up. And so you see kids with masks that aren't worn properly and not keeping distance. These are the types of things, and asymptomatic oftentimes, cases that are spreading the disease and having really a great burden on those that are at higher risk. So we all, we don't want to be the buzzkill here, and this is not going to be a fun message today, but it really needs to be a reality check and an opportunity for us to get serious, because as Commissioner Sorensen noted, the one tool the board has is to consider rolling back to phase 1. That is something that we are starting to talk about. I know Ms. Gaffney will touch on this and what would be involved in that, what would potentially trigger it, and what impacts it could have on the community. And I think we'll be prepared in the coming week or two to bring that forward if our numbers don't get any better. So with that, let me turn it over to Ms. Gaffney to walk through some more of the details for you.
Thank you, Steve, and Chair Buck and Commissioners. The county administrator kind of stole where I was going to land at the end. So let me take just a few minutes to walk through an update and some data. And then I think the question that the county administrator posed is, so what are we going to do about this? So I think that's what we can talk about as we move forward. The county administrator referenced our plan, and so I just wanted to start with that. And I know you've seen it a couple times this morning, so let me just move through to the update here. If I can get my screen to move. By now, this should be a familiar chart to each of you. And again, the data that I'm going to show today all comes off of our website. If anyone would like to look at it today or track its change over time, you can go to that by looking at the Lane County .org website and going to our COVID page. So this is our epi curve, and you can see the gray section at the end is the last 2 weeks, and you can see where our case numbers have been increasing. As of this morning, we have had a total of 1,276 cases, people positive with COVID during the course of the pandemic to date. We currently have 10 people in the hospital and 189 people who are currently infectious, and 18 people have died as a result of COVID-19 this year. Again, this epi curve is critical, and I'm not going to go through all of the tabs on it. One of the tabs that I think is important for us to track is that race and ethnicity tab, and we do currently have 18.8% of our people who have tested positive identify as Latinx, which is about twice the representation in the population. So that continues to be a critical equity issue for us to look at in terms of where we have people who are testing positive, and making sure that the messages we're directing are not only in Spanish, but also are bicultural and address specifically to the communities such as our mom community in South Lane County, where we are seeing cases. I know we talked about this last week of this alert system, and we have moved into high alert. These are also shots from our website. Want to be clear with the board and the community, the purpose of that alerting system is just that, to get the community's attention and say the numbers are going in the wrong direction. There are things to be concerned about here. If we don't turn around our behaviors, then we're going to have to look at more significant measures in order to contain the spread. So we moved to high last week. We continue to be at high this week, and really are using all of our communication channels to message that out to the community, in the same way that if you were looking at air quality or forest fire status, it says really we need to be careful, conditions have changed in our community. So that will be an important part of our work moving forward. Earlier this morning, you took time to recognize our case investigation team, and I appreciate that so much. As I said at that time, that group of people has been working diligently so hard for so long on the front lines of our pandemic. Once those individuals identify people who are positive and that initial list of contacts, those contacts become what we call PUMs, persons under monitoring. And then those are the people who are not currently positive for the disease, but who we have staff who reach out to them every day for the length of their quarantine to make sure that they don't have symptoms that need to be tested, and that they have what they need. So this chart shows you what our numbers have looked like for persons under monitoring. I think sometimes that's lost when we just talk about people who are positive. This is the work to contain the spread and make sure that those contacts are reached. And that's where we were as of yesterday for current contacts in the community, getting those everyday calls. I will say that Lane County has increased our staffing largely through extra help and some temporary staffs. Thank you for creating those positions for us. And also repurposing staff who have other day jobs and are willing to work extra hours to help with this effort. And then we have a contract with the University of Oregon as well, who is helping with that monitoring process. And they have increased their staff to address our increase in need. And I want to really appreciate the partnership from the University of Oregon in this. I think it's also important. So then once someone is in either isolation because they're ill or quarantine because they're a close contact, part of how we're able to help people stay in quarantine or isolation is to make sure that they have their basic needs met. Basically, we've instructed them to not leave their homes. And for many people, that's an impossibility. Some people aren't able to quarantine at home at all, and those are the people who we make accommodations for at the River Avenue facility that was purchased in the spring. As of yesterday, we had 13 people who were in isolation or quarantine at River Avenue, which is the highest number we've had to date. And again, I'm so grateful that there was the foresight to purchase that building and have that resource available for people who aren't able to quarantine or isolate at home. In addition, some people are able to stay home, but they need help in order to do that. So those are the people to whom we provide case management services. As of yesterday, we had 55 households in Lane County who were reliant on us to provide case management services to them. And that can be everything from groceries dropped off at their door so that they have food to maintain, That could be assistance in in applying for unemployment, for SNAP benefits, for other benefits they might be entitled to, diapers, a whole range of what you think of if you were trying to live for 2 weeks and suddenly someone told you you couldn't leave your house and you might not have support systems readily available to assist you with that. So that number has continued to increase as our number of cases and contacts has increased. And it really is a critical part of how we're able to encourage people to maintain quarantine and isolation. And then finally, in this strategy number 1 of containing the spread of disease, you know that testing is a critical part of our strategy. We set our goal of doing at least 500 tests, and you can see from the graph that we far exceed that. And in fact, the last week, we were almost to 1,000. We had 949 in that last week where the data is complete. And so I would imagine that this week, when we get our complete data for that week of September 20th, we'll probably exceed an average of 1,000 tests a day, every day for that week. This is how we know how much disease we have in the community, and we will continue to increase the testing availability as we move forward. And I know in our updates, we've talked about reservoir testing, and that piece is also a critical part of being able to target the most high-risk communities. We have worked with the Oregon Health Authority to bring in a testing team to assist with that next week. So we have several events planned to target rural communities in South Lane, our Latinx community in Springfield, and then a general testing event here in Eugene, Springfield as well. So you can anticipate testing will continue to increase through the fall. All right, number 2 in our 5 strategies was to make sure that providers and hospitals have what they need. And while we certainly are seeing our hospital numbers increase, I will tell you all of them are reporting that they are doing okay in terms of capacity. They clearly have plans for surge, and they have not needed to exercise those to date, but they are prepared if they need to do that. The third element of our plan is about making sure businesses and individual impacts because of the economic effects of COVID are addressed. And I know in our general reports to you, sorry, I missed that piece of paper. Just wanted to give you a quick update on some of those strategies. As of yesterday, we had assisted 636 households with assistance in terms of energy, and another 1,013 with LIHEAP. So that totals more than $700,000 into the community for energy assistance to date. And for rental assistance, we have assisted 770 households with $2.1 million worth of rental payment assistance to date. So that program continues to grow and assist people in the community as we roll towards fall. And then the other piece I know the board is interested in is the work that we've been doing in partnership with Community Lending Works and several of the rural cities. As you know, we started marketing for a new small business emergency grant fund with a funding pool of nearly $630,000. Applications for that are set to open next Monday, the 5th of October, and recipients will be selected via a lottery once the application period closes. And again, awards will be made based on the number of FTE, and the size of the award will range from $5,000 to $20,000. And businesses who received federal funds through the Paycheck Protection Program or the Economic Injury Disaster Loan are eligible to apply for that program. So I encourage people to look at our website, and there's more information there in terms of businesses wanting to either get information about the program or apply. Our business unit also, because of the increase in cases, has expanded hours to cover weekend outreach to businesses as we continue to identify workplace outbreaks. Many of our businesses as employers have a lot of questions about how best to manage that situation. So we are providing 7-day-a-week answers that are specifically targeted for our business partners in the community. And I have to say the vast majority of businesses are incredibly cooperative and continue to implement practices to protect employees and customers. So there is contact information on the website if there are businesses in the community who have questions and would like to talk to someone from Lane County. The fourth piece is around public information and guidance. And in this area, I think it's important to highlight a couple things from the last week. One is our work with higher education partners. I know all of you have been tracking our daily release on cases and know that we've had a significant percentage of our new cases in that 17 to 28-year-old age group. And I appreciate the U of O last week convened a gathering with not only the U of O, but also LCC and Bushnell University and Public Health to start to go through that data on the new cases, really find out where those pockets of behaviors are that we need to change, and bring their communications staff to bear to help us in targeting that population in particular. There are some tools that the universities have, such as more modern, I guess I will say, social media that targets some of those populations. The county is pretty limited to Instagram and Facebook, which all of us might be on, but might not be the best way to reach the 20-year-olds. So the universities are being very helpful in amplifying our messages, and then we in turn are able to take advantage of some of the great work that they do and amplify those as well. And then finally, in communications, I would say our call center continues at a steady volume. This last week, we've been at about 75 calls a day. So that continues to meet a need for the community. People who have questions that can't find that on the internet, or really just need to talk through symptoms with someone on the other end of the phone. All right, and then the last element, and I do have a slide for this one, is to talk about the fall and winter. This is sobering data that came out early this morning. Many of you know this as the school metric data. The Department of Education, in cooperation with the Oregon Health Authority, have released 2 specific metrics that they published for schools to be indicators of when to reopen schools in general and when there could be an exception for K through 3. And I included the data from the state as well as Lane County's data. And if you look at that last line, this is the data from last week. It reflects really significant increase in cases. I will say that the Department of Education has said that the positivity rate will not be considered for the month of September because there were problems because of the fires and the smoke. The state lab closed down for a while, so that data is not as reliable. But the cases per 100,000 are the cases per 100,000. And so even not looking at positivity rates, you can see that we have a problem in Lane County. And we have more than doubled our new cases from last week, which was more than double the week before. To circle back around to, Commissioner Sorensen's comments too, we clearly have, we've seen an acceleration in cases that we have known from the beginning was possible. We were able during the first 6 months of the pandemic to really keep that at bay in our community. And we know the same tools are available to the community now that have been available all along. And just for purpose of emphasis, I'll say again, it's wearing masks, it's physical distancing, it's good hand hygiene. And that's what we need people to do. And that's how we will bend the curve and the challenge really in front of us as a community to turn those numbers around. So let's talk a little bit about what we do. I think our plan, as we outlined those strategies, those absolutely keep moving forward. And I'll harken back to the introductory comments from the county administrator. There are some things that Lane County has authority to do and some things that we don't. We don't have the authority to close schools. That's the school districts who do that. And we don't have the authority to decide what the practices are for Pac-12 sporting events. That's all being managed through the governor's office. But we do, as a county, have in our toolbox the decision about phasing and requesting of the governor, do we feel like we stay at phase 2 or should we move back to phase 1? And what does that mean? I think that we need to consider that question. And, you know, from my perspective, if we continue to see these numbers continuing to increase, then we need to look carefully at that option. What I would suggest is, I know the community has alerted in ways that they weren't before. So I remain hopeful that the behavior change will happen that needs to happen. And I also think that it's worth considering perhaps next week coming back with what would the actual changes be if the county moved to phase 1? What would that look like in the community? That would not require an ordinance. That was a decision that the board made and could certainly make with a majority vote again. So I think I'm going to pause there. And if there are questions or other data, I would be happy to hear that. And I guess the other thing I want the commissioners to know is that our staff are working hard to really reach out to those entities who seem to have forgotten why it is that we are working so hard to do physical distancing and encourage people to not gather. And while they may be meeting the letter of the law in some of these guidance, really double down and remind people that lives are at stake in this work. And it's important that we do what we can as a community so that ultimately our businesses and our schools can stay open. Chair Buck, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Sorensen.
Thanks a lot. Yes, these numbers are quite alarming as they are going up rapidly as a result of the failure of government to give direction to the public. And I don't mean just county government, because obviously Ms. Gaffney has been very clear from maybe March on that the and our own physicians have been really clear that physical distancing and mask wearing are the way to beat this. But I mean, I'm referring to the messages being sent from President Trump and the people attending his political rallies not to wear masks. People see that. They see a lot more of that actually than they see any emails or websites that the county puts out. And so the whole problem is there's no real, real clear messaging to the public. We have not spent, to my knowledge, any money, any significant money on massive public education in the form of TV ads. Hey, folks, there's an emergency going on here, and if you don't wear your mask, more people will die. Not, it would be nice, or, gee, I mean, and I'm really struck by how we've put all this energy into our fatal accident investigation team, and we've stressed over and over that engineering of road safety is an important component of this, but also enforcement is a component. And yet I see that the public health folks really are leaving it up to politics. And, you know, there's a time-honored expression in public health that when you mix public health with politics, you get politics. And that's what we're faced here. We know what we need to do. We need to require these masks being used. We need to require social distancing. We need to do it. The state and federal government refuse to do it. The cities refuse to do it. Who else is left? We are the public health authority for this county. We need to enact something to make it clear that this isn't just a guidance. This is something that has to be done to save lives. And quite frankly, you know, we're getting into the period where we could have a real calamity on top of what we have now, where we're doubling. And I hope we don't have to double this nearly 200 to 400, and then that 400 to double to 800 in only 2 weeks. So I really think we need now to make a motion to revert back to phase one. In fact, at this time, Chair, I'm going to move that we move back to phase one. I'll just make that motion in light of that being the only suggestion that Ms. Gaffney had. So I move that we ask the state to move us back to phase one.
Is there a second? I'm not seeing a second, so that motion fails. Is there any other comments? Commissioner Farr?
Thank you, Chair Buck. And I listened closely and intently to Commissioner Sorensen's words, and he's absolutely correct in the inability that we have demonstrated to get people's attention to how critical the issues are. We still see a lot of people, as Commissioner Sorensen has noted, without masks, holding hands in public, figuratively speaking. And we see it every single day. You know, I was at an event where people were very well spaced last week, and even though people were 6 feet or more apart, all of a sudden the speakers were talking without their masks on. Well, at that point, you know, that's a signal to leave if you're concerned at all. So, Chair Buck, I agree with Commissioner Sorensen in many of the points that he made, but where I really want to focus is that in my many years working in customer service and public service, getting messages across, it is essential that you get the message across in terms that people understand. And what we probably haven't done, and what we don't do very well as a government, is talk to people in terms that they understand. And Ms. Gaffney, you put out some words today that people should understand, the words that should resonate. You asked a question, do we need to go back to phase one? And you said, if we see the numbers continuing to increase, we have to consider this option. Well, people should and would understand those exact words. If the numbers increase, we would have to consider going back to the option. People don't want that. Very few people would rejoice at the fact that Lane County moved back to phase one. So my impression and my strong urging is that if we get the message out, that is a message that will resonate and people will understand. I'm not sure that full page ads in the local newspaper, which few people read anyway, are going to do it. You know, I don't know if TV commercials on Comcast, where you have 99 different channels that you're looking at, that people would see them. So finding ways to get it out of people that if we don't comply, we are going to move backward, and our freedom of movement, freedom of ability to go places that we want to go will be restricted once again. Nobody wants to see that. So let's get the message out in terms that people understand. I think Commissioner Sorensen, I came darn close to seconding your motion. I think there's further discussion that needs to be had and further consideration that needs to be taken before we move into that step, Ms. Gaffney. But you said some words today that everybody should understand. And I think by broadcasting those words, people should listen and understand the message.
Any other comments?
Chair Buck, if I could just, one thing I failed to mention during the presentation, and I want to make sure the board knows, is we are also purchasing additional media. So Commissioner Farr, I don't know if it will matter if we're on Comcast or not, but I can tell you we're pulling out the stops and we're going to try. So we did authorize this week, in addition to the bus boards and billboards that we've had up for the last month or two, we are doing an additional ad buy that will include more radio. We've been on the radio, but more radio and television as well. So that you should see that coming in the next week too.
And pardon my quick response on that, Ms. Gaffney. You talked about the university having ways to get to people that we don't necessarily have, their social media. And whenever I read news, or not whenever, but quite often when I read news reports, whether it's something the governor said or something the president said, it said the governor tweeted, the president tweeted. So I don't know, how do we get involved in making certain that that we're getting this strong message? You will lose freedoms if we continue to deteriorate as far as the numbers are concerned. You know, it's a message that people should understand, and just getting it to them so they can hear it, then they are more likely to understand it and do it. So Ms. Gaffney, thank you. Your words are perfect. Just need everybody to hear them.
Mr. Brozovich.
Thank you. So I'm going to lead off with a question somewhat, and this is mostly for the public's benefit. And I kind of wish there was a way of, on our Tableau, that you could get both the test data and the epi curve in the same view. Because one of the first things I've been hearing back from people is, oh, well, the testing's increasing and that's why we're seeing this increase in Lane County. Might have been true in June and July, because that actually matches up somewhat between the epi curve and the testing data. Not so much now, and I've been trying to put that out there. We really haven't seen an increase in capacity in testing data. Is that a fair statement?
I would say our testing has been quite high for a while now. So no, this is a real increase in disease.
Yeah, and I am very concerned with that. In fact, I've been trying to encourage people maybe to cancel some of their events. I've backed out of participating in an event coming up this weekend for just that reason. But I will say I did not second the motion about going back to phase one, because the phase one, phase two tools were a very blunt instrument and not well thought out. One of the things you can't have open during phase one is RV campgrounds. And, you know, Elizabeth and I refer to our Airstream now as the COVID capsule, because we can actually get away from our house, taking all of our food and needs with us, and never really interacting or using public restroom facilities, because our public restroom comes with us. And, you know, it's a great social distancing tool. But under phase one, you would be shutting down, you know, all those campgrounds that I normally go to. I just spent the weekend at the Cedar RV Resort down there at the beach, you know, to get a little bit of fresh air and get the dogs out on the beach, well social distanced and all that, brought all our food with us. But you would be shutting that campground down under phase one. And that's, you know, they need to maybe relook at those phase one, phase two levels as to what makes sense, because they were done so quickly, they didn't make a lot of sense on some of what was open versus not open. You know, RV campgrounds closed, in-person massages, okay. You know,
and Commissioner Brozovich, I think your point is a good one in terms of being really clear about what would it mean to go back to phase one. And so certainly if our numbers continue to grow, we'll do an analysis, because some of those phases have changed since we were in phase one. So just to make sure that we're clear what that would really mean before the board took that action.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Commissioner Berney?
Several points. So Karen, just to clarify, you are not now recommending action to reinstate phase one. Is that correct?
Thanks for asking for the clarity. I would say right now we are on significant alert for that. And I would say if things don't start to turn around by next week, that's the recommendation that I'm likely to make.
Okay. Are you making that recommendation now?
I want to look at what exactly it would mean to go to phase one so that we can be clear about whether that's going to have the needed effect at stemming the tide of disease.
So that is not your recommendation now.
I did not come to you today with a recommendation to move to phase one. No,
Thank you.
I am coming with an alert, both for you and the community, that the tools remaining in our toolbox are limited, and that may be what's necessary.
Got it. I heard on the news last night that the federal government is sending 150 million rapid tests to states. What is your expectation in terms of when those will hit Lane County, and how many and how they'll be deployed?
Chair Buck, Vice Chair Berney, I don't have the exact deployment plan for those. I saw the same announcement that you did in terms of the rapid tests. So I will have to get back to you on that. I know our focus on increasing testing has been looking at this team from the Oregon Health Authority that's going to be on the ground next week to help with that, as well as the work with the University of Oregon. Now that load-in is pretty much completed, they're moving to their regular rhythm of ongoing surveillance testing of their students, and to be able to expand that to the community. So that's the conversation I'm having this week, expanding the U of O's capacity. But I'll find out about that.
No, thank you. I just don't know why you don't know immediately something that was just announced last night. I wanted to ask you that, though. I would like to, first of all, acknowledge to Ms. Gaffney and to the foot soldiers that make up our public health frontline responders a real thank you. I get that you are stretched beyond capacity, that earlier we were talking about an analogy to a marathon or a super marathon, but the fact is we have nothing really that provides an analogy to pandemic, economic downturn, politicization of all of that, and now wildfires that simply exacerbate everything and have limited our capacity to respond. This has not been seen before. So I'd like to focus my only other remark on this. We have heard at several board meetings now about money's going to be spent on getting the word out. We're buying radio ads, we're buying TV ads. It seems to me that this is an all hands on deck moment if we want to avoid you coming to us and recommending going back to phase one. I really agree with what Commissioner Farr said. So I'm hoping that you're having the owners of all of the media and media consulting firms in this community on some sort of an ad hoc advisory group offering in kind to get that out. I hope they are guiding strategically how you get multiple touches, because that's really what advertising is all about. It's multiple touches through whatever medium people use. I hope you are doing the kind of geofencing that some political campaigns are doing these days to get the message on the phones or the computers of whatever people are reading. I hope that the message is not a soft one, but a hard one, such as the words you've given us, that again, Commissioner Farr said, if people heard it, they'd get it. I hope that in the communication, people know the commissioners have instructed this, because the last frickin' thing we want is to have to go back to stage one. But the data is going to define what we do. And I hope that you're also looking at the communications infrastructures that so many groups, from school districts to chambers of commerce to different nonprofit organizations to business associations, retail groups, storefronts, if we're going to be all hands on deck and get communication and messages out so we can avoid the tragedy of having to revert, I'm not asking you to defend or explain. I'm simply stating that there are ways to strategically mobilize resources to get messages out now. Thank you very much. Now, with a staff that's stressed and stretched, I understand. But if you're going to recommend to us in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks doing something, then we can't wait a week or two for the message to get out. It has to be now. We have to educate the people immediately. I'm sorry, one last thing. I'm guessing there are less than 100 people watching this at this moment. I'm guessing there will be less than 1,000, but I don't know, that play it. That's not good enough. Making the announcement here and us talking about it isn't good enough. Thank you so much. I want to do anything to avoid you recommending that. And yet I also will let the data define our actions.
Well, this is a sobering conversation after a massive wildfire event. I understand why you're bringing this to our attention. It's clearly problematic. Our numbers are clearly problematic. I think what we're asking of the community really is we need you masked up and physically distanced, or we have to seriously reconsider going back to phase one. That is not an easy ask for you to come to us today. So I want to acknowledge that, you know, you're bringing us the best information that you have and the best medical information that you have. And that's not an easy thing to explain to the public and get across. So we will clearly be contemplating this over the next week. The week after that is a down week. So there won't be an option unless we come back with an emergency board meeting after that if numbers really start to skyrocket. So we will be alert and see how the numbers go for the upcoming week. Commissioner Farr.
Chair Buck, thank you. I just wanted to bring up a quote that Chief Busick said, and it became particularly evident when you were talking just now. What Chief Busick said was, and I quote, "To be honest, we took a little break from COVID and focused on the fire." And I think that's universally true. I think a lot of people did take a break from COVID. I actually heard people say that, well, COVID's not a big deal, the fire's a big deal. Well, here we are. The break's over, I guess, right?
It's very interesting that because as I was out, excuse me, with the public, you know, you can see smoke, you can smell smoke, so it's very natural to put on your mask at that point. But with COVID, it's still out there, but you can't see it, you can't smell it, but just as dangerous. And that's really hard for people when their senses, their natural senses, don't detect it. All right, if there's no other comments for this item, we will move on to our consent calendar. Thank you, Ms. Gaffney. So we have some items on our consent calendar to approve. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Burney, second by Commissioner Sorensen. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, so we are on to item D. No, that's part of the consent calendar. We're on to County Council, and I believe there are a couple of announcements on redistricting and campaign finance that Mr. Nagel wanted to share. If he's on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, so the first item was the request by Commissioner Sorensen regarding campaign financing. You'll recall there was a Supreme Court decision this past summer. It really didn't lend the clarity that was necessary. The big issues were remanded to the Multnomah County Circuit Court. They were scheduled to be argued a couple weeks ago. That got delayed. I've been in contact with the attorney from Multnomah County. They did argue those matters. They've been taken under advisement. They're, as you can imagine, they're pretty extensive because I think there were a number of amicus that filed briefs and whatnot. She expects a ruling sometime in October. My recommendation is before we that we get those rulings and have a chance to look at those and have those be part of the record before we schedule that particular work session. That's just my recommendation. And I wanted to update, and I've been keeping Commissioner Sorensen in the loop on the timing of this and the briefs that were filed. He can attest that they were pretty extensive. And then the second thing is that the redistricting thing. I worked with Ms. Jones and I worked with Commissioner Burney as was directed at the agenda team. And I believe Commissioner Burney has an email that we put together jointly that outlines everything. And I think he's going to announce it at the readout at the appropriate time what the process will be for the next work session on redistricting. That's everything that I have.
Okay, Commissioner Sorensen?
Concerning the campaign finance rules or possible rule changes, I think Mr. Dingle has properly said we should get the court ruling and before we schedule it, and that may mean a month, it may mean 5 months, but I agree that we should wait until we get that additional legal ruling. And concerning the other thing, I don't know anything about that. Would like to hear about it.
So Chair Buck and Commissioner Sorensen, like I said, I have had the attorney has agreed to notify me immediately and send me the rule that comes down. So as soon as I get that, I'll let you know, Commissioner Sorensen.
Commissioner Burney.
First, I want to remind the board and Commissioner Sorensen that we've provided no direction at all to Mr. Dingle on a redistricting process. In fact, Commissioner Sorensen suggested the agenda team pick it up. So just as a common frame of reference here, the agenda team did. I was delegated to and offered, volunteered, because there was some direction and specificity needed. I worked with Mr. Dingle. Mr. Dingle crafted from our conversations a draft process, and that draft process filling in blanks. How many minutes for this? What dates do we need to do that by? That process is what we're going to review later. And Mr. Dingle, rather than say I'm going to read it, is it possible for you to email people or somehow get to people before this afternoon, that Friday email you sent me? Because that seems as if that is the draft process we need to look at.
Absolutely. I'll send it to, as soon as we're done with this portion of the meeting, I'll send it to the board. And I think Ms. Jones has it already, but I'll send it to the board and Mr. Mokrahysky and Ms. Jones.
Thank you, sir.
Just for clarity, that process is for us creating a work session and inviting a couple of speakers who were interested in the issue to come speak and do any more public comment if we want to do that again.
If I may, Chair, the overarching themes of this are to invite as much opportunity for public input as possible and to ensure that it's a fair process. And we'll look at it in the afternoon. I'm sorry to interrupt.
You're good. No, that's all right. Okay, that's all for County Council announcements this morning. Okay, any other business for our morning meeting that we need to tend to? Okay, looks like we are half an hour early for our noon break. Unless there's anything special we want to discuss this morning before break. No? Okay. Well, then we are in recess. Thank you, everyone.